Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Garden Hour for our 2023 regularly scheduled season. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're new to Garden Hour, welcome. We're so glad you found us. If you are returning to Garden Hour and have been following us for the last two seasons, following us into our third season, we're so glad that you keep returning, and thanks for telling your friends and bringing them to Garden Hour. My name is Kristine Lang, and I'm an assistant professor and SDSU Extension Consumer Horticulture Specialist. And I have the incredible pleasure of being one of the regular hosts of Garden Hour. And I'm really excited because tonight we have a couple of special guests who I'll be introducing to you in just a moment. So I want to remind everybody for Garden Hour, as we're presenting, if you have questions for any of the speakers, please do drop those questions in the Q&A box and we will answer as many of those as you can. You might have deduced that tonight is going to have a little bit of a flower and a vegetable theme. Myself and Sydney Trio and Alexis Barnes are all excited to talk about vegetables and flowers, and Sydney might talk to us a little bit about trees too. So my other panelists tonight, returning for another Garden Hour experience as a special guest, is going to be Sydney Trio. And Sydney, what are you going to be talking about tonight?
Hello, I'll be talking about a little bit what's going on at McCrory and some events we have coming up soon.
Awesome. Yes, this is going to be an episode packed full of love for McCrory Gardens as well. But even if you're, on the other side of the state or outside of South Dakota and can't make it to McCrory Gardens, we're very excited to share some tips and tricks and maybe some lessons that you can adapt for your garden. All right. So making her Garden Hour debut tonight, I'm very excited to announce that Alexis Barnes, graduate research assistant in the Lang Lab and the Plant Sciences Department, is joining us. And Alexis, what are you going to be sharing tonight?
So I will be talking about how to burn landscape fabric and a little bit about cover crops.
Wonderful. And that's well timed because many of us are getting our gardens ready and thinking about how can we prevent weeding later in the season. So we look forward to hearing from Alexis. And tonight I'm going to be sharing, I'm honestly going to be doing a trial recap about the perennial plants that did really well in our 2022 trials at McCrory Gardens. So you're going to get to see lots of beautiful plant photos tonight. I know you were worried that you weren't going to get enough plant photos. I will admit there's no cat or dog in any of my photos tonight. John Ball's not here, so he can't chastise me, but I'll do better next time. All right, without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Sydney back to tell us what's growing on at McCrory Gardens and share some events. I'll turn it over to you, Sydney.
All right. Let me share my screen. All right, well, thank you for having me today. I'm Sydney Trio. I'm the education coordinator and horticulturist at McCrory Gardens. I do a lot of tours and presentations, and you'll get to see some of what's growing on at McCrory. Our mission statement is to connect people and plants through education, discovery, research, and enjoyment of the natural and built landscape. So I get to help with the education part, and you'll see what else is growing. A little bit about McCrory. We are part of SDSU, so we are located in Brookings. If you've ever drove on 14, you'll see that sign, and we are right behind there. We started off in 1965 as 2 acres of research. Now we are over 70 acres of formal and arboretum space. A little bit what we have going on in each of the seasons. We have spring, the tulips right here. Summer, a ton of bright colors. I'll be showing some of our seeding process too. Then we have the fall, super bright trees, and then garden glow. We have probably a couple 100,000 lights. So we are busy year round. Recently, we just had our Tulip Palooza. It just ended. We plant over 12,500 bulbs. You can see the big bed right here. And then we'll dig them up once they're done, and then we'll cut the leaves off and then plant them in other parts of the garden. So it's kind of cool. We get to keep seeing the tulips grow more and more each year. This is this year in the garden. We have some of the plants growing. This is the first one, Coleus. Then right here is a monkey flower. These are just two of the many, many plants we plant. We plant over 40,000 plants in our greenhouse on campus. This is just a small picture too. So it starts off with the seeds we have here. This is an example. This is a scientific name we have. And then how many seeds? 250. Right here we have the germination. So how much of it is actually going to germinate. And then where we got it from, because we want people to come here and see the plants. And if they like them, we can tell them where they got them so they can grow them too. A lot of where we get our plants is Ivy Garth. We also do Johnny Seeds and Baker's Creek are some of the big ones we get them from. Some more with the growing process, we start off with sifting the soil. Sometimes you get really big clumps of soil and we want the water to go through the soil and not have any air. This is some of our crew planting the seeds. Some of them are really small, so we have to have a device that kind of plants them in there. And then we put it on a soaker, like a water tray, and then the water absorbs up. We do that instead of overhand watering right away, so then the seeds don't get lost and washed out right away. Here are some of the plants growing after a few days. You can see not all of them make it, but they start to pop up after a few days. And then this is 3 to 5 weeks. This is the cannas here. And then after a while, the small plug we have right there, we have to put them into a bigger pots so then they can keep growing. We actually were able to go into Dr. Lang's local foods class and they transplanted our cannas and geraniums. Here is a picture of us watering. It's Hannah. She, what we do is for our seedlings, we have a little fertilizer pump right here, and we do 150 parts per million just for the seedlings. We water them 2 to 3 times a day with the fertilizer, otherwise just regular watering. And then once they start growing up, we kind of lessen the fertilizer. And then here's the plants in the greenhouse. Then I do have a little video. So that was taken last year, and we actually just started the great migration of bringing all the plants from the greenhouse to McCrory. We didn't get all of them, but this is just some of them. And this is our awesome crew. We were busy today moving them. For anyone wanting to come to the gardens, we do have admissions. You can become a member. And then this is a lot of words, but here's all the rates. But we are open 7 days a week from 10 to 6. And for those who don't know, it is American Public Gardens Association Go Public Gardens Week, which is May 12th through the 21st. So the first way we celebrate this is by lighting the whole building green. And then the second way is the Garden Discovery Festival. So that will be this Sunday from 1 to 5 p.m. at McCrory Gardens. We'll have tons of different events and activities set up. It is in collaboration with SDSU Extension, and we'll be having the Brookings Area Master Gardener plant sales and South Dakota Native Plant Initiative plant sales. We'll also have tons of presentations, tours, and a bunch of exhibitors. So it's a fun way to interact. For those of you who might not know a lot about gardening, or maybe you're a pro, I think you'll still learn something and you'll have lots of fun. And then another upcoming event we have is a Phil Baker Children's Concert on May 24th. And then here's an overall calendar of events. If any of you guys are interested, maybe you want to take a picture of this. All the events we have going on throughout the year. So lots of activities. Are there any questions?
Well, that was great, Sydney. Maybe do you want to back it up for a moment while we're chatting? Just, yeah, that big calendar of events, let people grab that. And then maybe I'll have you in a moment jump back to your contact information. So, Sydney, I have a couple of questions. And again, if anyone who's listening is curious about, how or why McCrory Gardens does anything with how they grow their plants in the greenhouse or, their process for moving things out, I have a question, Sydney. You talked about just briefly about how you plant those teeny tiny seeds, and you said you used a special tool. Can you explain what that is or how it works? And I know that you all use it to plant snapdragons, which is great because in my lab, we just plant the snapdragons by pinching them with our fingertips, and my students are probably ready to quit on me. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because it might be of interest to some of the folks who love growing flowers from seed.
Yes. So some of the plants we just have on our hand and then we pinch them too, but other ones are too small to even see. So what we do is we have, I don't know the technical name for it, but there is a battery operated, it just kind of puts the seed out at a time with vibrations. So then it goes one at a time. Yeah, I'm not sure what the name is, but it's a pretty cool tool to use.
Yeah, and that little bit of vibration, am I right? Can you turn that up and down so it can go fast or slow? Because it'll go slower for the teeny tiny seeds, correct?
Correct, yep.
Yep. Now, to be fair, I tried it once with the McCrory staff when I helped seeding my first year here. And even that takes a fine, you can't have, you have to be patient is what I learned.
Yes, it is.
And Sydney, you were showing all those plants making that great migration out to McCrory Gardens. And last year, oh my goodness, last week, I reminded everyone to harden off their transplants. And I followed my own advice for the most part and hardened off most of my plants for about a week. How long, all those plants that are sitting outside in that fenced area at McCrory, how long are they sitting there before they're all getting planted in the gardens? And what does your planting process look like?
So we usually leave them for about a week or two, and then as soon as the temperatures are super nice, which they have been recently, which is awesome, we'll plant them out into the gardens. And we have different themed gardens, so we'll have a red garden, a yellow garden. So we take those certain plants to the areas, and then we let the student staff kind of design them and plant them in there.
All right. Well, that leads to a question I'm curious about. And, I know different gardeners in here probably draw out garden maps or map out their containers, but how in the world do you and your staff keep track of, we need this many plants for the red garden? And what does that planning, or like, is it maps, or is it just, okay, we think this is going to be the red garden, and if we do X number of plants, it should all fit? So how are like plant spacing decisions and maps decided?
I think so. Mostly Chris kind of like puts the plants there that we need, and then we just go from there.
Okay.
He's done it for about 15 years, so he's kind of a pro.
All right.
We can always, if we need more plants, we just go back to the shop and get more plants and add them in areas that we need.
Awesome. And when you say Chris, I know for folks who are listening, Chris Shalanker is the lead horticulturalist. And again, has years of experience. So as our experienced gardeners know, sometimes you get a sense of how many plants you need, or you have some of those records written down. And for new gardeners who are listening, don't be afraid to maybe rearrange plants, see what you like this year, and then take some photos and notes to jot down, I'm really going to do that differently next year, because I'm doing that in my own garden as well. So Sydney, maybe two last questions for you. Is there something you're really excited about growing this year? Do you have a plant like, I'm going to keep an eye on this plant and I can't wait to show you a picture next garden hour?
Yes. So 2 years ago, I really liked the treasure flower, which is gazania. And then this last year, I noticed we did not have it. So I told Amy, our curator, she's the one who plans all of how many we seed and stuff. I was like, we have to have the treasure flower. So this year we have a ton, and I'm super excited.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to photos.
Yes.
Now, we did inspire a question with our discussion about hardening off plants. So someone has a small, I'm guessing it's one of those small backyard kind of pop-up style greenhouses. If I could fit one of those on my balcony, I certainly would. And they're growing plants in that backyard greenhouse. Do they need to harden them off before planting? My answer is going to be yes. I would strongly recommend, pulling those plants out and letting them sit maybe in some kind of a shadier spot in the yard, acclimate to ambient conditions, as long as it's not going to dip below, 40 degrees or, certainly 35, especially with some sensitive plants. Like if you're growing basil, for example, if it dips below 40 for basil, you're going to get a lot of black mushy leaves. But I would recommend getting those plants out, and that hardening process is really just about getting those plants acclimated to outdoor conditions. And I'm equally guilty of this. We get excited, we pull our plants out of the greenhouse, or we go shopping at the garden center and we bring everything home and we're super excited to plant it. But if you do let those plants sit for a few days, keep them watered, keep them hydrated. We don't want to just like make them suffer. But that helps strengthen the stems and the cells. It prevents sunburn, because believe it or not, even in that greenhouse, they're not getting as much sunlight. There's some sunlight, diffusion compared to if they were sitting directly out in the middle of your full sun garden. So that's where when I say pull plants out to harden off, sometimes people kind of put them under like an umbrella if you've got like 2 trays of plants and you just want to set them on your patio. Or our plants currently, and maybe Alexis will share more of this if there's time, but our plants are currently sitting on the north side of a building, so they're getting some shade, but they're also getting that exposure to those cooler temperatures, so that you're not taking those plants out of the greenhouse, putting them in the soil. They're trying to root in, they're trying to take up water, and they're going, oh my gosh, these temperature extremes are nuts, and then they start to wilt and look really sad. So you're preventing some of that sadness. And we do have a nice step-by-step guide on how to harden off plants on our SDSU extension website. And that was maybe more than you ever wanted to know about that, but it's a great question. It's a very timely question because we're all getting our hands in the soil right now. So last question, Sydney. You had some awesome photos of people working out in the gardens. If I'm watching Garden Hour right now and I've got, I don't know, like a young person, or if I happen to be someone who doesn't have summer plans yet, are you still hiring? How could I work at McCrory Gardens?
We are still hiring. If you love to work out in the gardens, this would be an awesome place to work. You get to work with the plants and kind of learn as you grow. You can apply online or email me. Yeah.
Awesome. So check out the McCrory Gardens website or get in contact with Sydney. And I can attest to the fact that it's a beautiful place to work. I try to spend time out there for trials. I'm kicking myself that I missed the tulip bloom. All right, well, we really appreciate it, Sydney. And again, Sydney's going to be hanging out all night. So we'll, if there's other questions for Sydney or things that we want to discuss, we'll definitely bring you out. And I know you'll be hanging out in the background. So next up, again, as we think about summer preparations and spring to-dos, how in the world are we going to manage weeds becomes the next question. So I'm going to welcome Alexis, and I think Sydney, if you stop sharing, we'll transition to Alexis. A little bit of background on Alexis. She moved here the day of the derecho last year and jumped into her graduate program 1 week after graduating with her bachelor's degree. She moved to South Dakota. The welcome was, there was a derecho. We're so glad you're here. And jumped feet first into her program, working with cover crops and studying the effects on pepper, broccoli, and squash production. And Rhoda Burrows and I have the pleasure of co-advising Alexis, and I'm really excited that she gets to share some gardening tips and tricks with you. So Alexis, I'll let you take it away with your intro and what you want us to know about landscape fabric.
Yeah, so like Dr. Lang had said, I'm Alexis. My bachelor's is in geography and sustainability, and I basically just showed up to South Dakota one day and decided that I wanted to work with cover crops. So why am I talking about plastic mulch and landscape fabric? Well, they are very relevant to small farmers and market gardeners. So you can see the picture on the left, that is plastic mulch, and plastic mulch is a really common use with small farmers. Because it really helps suppress weeds, and it can also help beautify the area because you won't see as much plant debris and you also won't see those weeds. And it also allows the plant to just be, you cut the plastic and then you plant whatever crop you're planting in there. So it's really useful for farmers. However, there has been a lot of pushback with it because it is a single-use plastic and you do have to apply it every year. So there is some pushback with it, and that has led to some alternatives like landscape fabric. And you can see in the photo on the right, there is a little bit of some labor-intensive work with it, and it is a little bit of a process, but it is more durable. It's woven. You can kind of set up the template. You do have to cauterize the holes, but it is really fun, and it's just kind of an interesting process. So there are many burners that you can use. My lab, we do a lot of landscape fabric burning because we do a lot of work with no-till, cover crops, living mulches, and then we also look at the fabric applications because we want to stay relevant for those farmers and small gardeners. So we use the Johnny Selected Seed mulch torch burner, and that's a really high-tech trigger burner that really gets the holes where you want them. But you also can just go small and you can use a blowtorch from any hardware store. And there also are some with the cones like the one from Amazon, and you can get those from any hardware store as well. And in this photo, that's one of the undergraduate research assistants in this lab, in our lab. We start with templates because you can install the fabric in the field and then you can burn it or cut it, whatever's easier for you. But if you are trying to consider drip tape irrigation, there might be some problems with burning and you don't want to ruin some of that drip tape. And so what we kind of do in our lab is we start by just burning the pieces of fabric. We specifically work a lot with 12-foot, 30-foot, 48-foot, 120. Just kind of depends on our crop, our guard row, what are we working with. So here we're just kind of starting to set it up. And then from here, we kind of start with our templates. So this is a 9x9-inch grid that we use for our guard row flowers. That's some small cut flower research that we do. And you can kind of eyeball this if you want to. That's what we're doing at my garden at home, and I don't recommend it. It's kind of weird, but if you make a template and you measure it out and you really know what you're looking for, the template can be really helpful to make things perfect in a sense. It can really control the burning on those holes. You won't have extremely stretched holes, and you can really manage it. And in this photo, you can really see that. This is a different grid. I believe this is 12 by 18. And this is what I use for my broccoli. You can use it for cabbage. We use it for peppers, broccolini. There's so many things that you can use this for. And you can see that those holes are cauterized, and obviously they're not going to be perfect around the edges, and they might be a little jagged, but I mean, it looks great. What more could you ask for? It looks great. And so that's been really helpful for us. And you can kind of see in this photo that it is woven. So rain can move through quicker and easier compared to plastic mulch. So there's that added benefit. You can use a hose on it if you don't want to buy or invest in drip tape, and it will last a little bit longer. And you can install this with landscape staples or sod staples, or is what some places will call them. And these can also be reused. They might get a little rusted or corroded, but it actually makes them apply a little bit easier the next year. And it's really nice to be able to reuse them because you're not having to put those costs up front every single year, and you can just rely with what you have. And so this was actually my end result last year. So you can see on the left, those were some of my peppers that we planted. And you can see, there's some staples in the middle. In South Dakota, we have winds, so we kind of freaked out and put way too many staples, but I'd rather have more and have a derecho and we'd be okay. And then on the right, you can see that we use that for squash, and we also did use a lot of staples. But down in that field, we do have a lot more weedier conditions. And so the fabric was really great for us because it was able to really smother out a lot. And this fabric was also, we are able to use it this year too. So it really is able to be used more than once versus a plastic mulch. You really won't be able to do that again. And so here are some other alternatives too. So on the left, that was my broccoli planting in July 2022. And you can see that was just, we had different management treatments. So that's why some plots have it and some don't. But it worked really well. And then Dr. Lang, this is her melon trial down in Beersford at the Southeast Research Farm. I thought this was a really good example of, we do use landscape fabric in our walkways in the high tunnel, and it really just helps to suppress weeds. And this fabric has been down for a few years, maybe a year. I don't know, Dr. Lang, you can chime in on that if you want to, but I just wanted to show this as it is really durable. It looks a little worn, but it's really durable. It has been really helpful, and you can use this more than once. So I thought this was a really good example of that. I don't know if you wanted to chime in, Dr. Lang.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me in. That landscape fabric in the high tunnel, this will actually be the third season, and we did leave that pinned down over winter, which worked really well, except for the first overwintering when the high tunnel plastic had, one of the doors blew out, and then a wind caught the fabric and it kind of rolled all up, and I had to unroll it and staple it down. But yeah, that landscape fabric in the high tunnel has worked wonders because there's some pretty heavy thistle pressure in that high tunnel. So we'll even see in the holes that we still have to pull thistles out from time to time. So Alexis, maybe I'll ask you a question right now and then I'll duck out. What do you do about the weeds in the holes that seem to find that 3-inch circle and still grow around the broccoli and the peppers?
Yeah, so we do pull those. For data collection, we have to do data first, and then we pull them, but we do pull them, and it's not very time consuming because instead, if you didn't have the fabric, you'd have to worry about, weeding the whole plot, and it's not desirable looking. And then you can, worry about competition with your cash crop. And so with that, with a landscape fabric, you don't really have to worry about that as much. You just have to worry about weeding the little holes. And we do have some thistle pressures. Beersford is really bad with our weeds and our thistles, but we do get some in Brookings as well. So that is a concern. But yeah, sorry, going on from there, just to talk about something else really briefly. If you are concerned with the environmental waste stream and you do really want to move away from plastic, including landscape fabric, another thing to discuss is living mulches. So if you have not talked to me at an event before, I specifically study clover cover crops as a living mulch in various production systems. And so these are, perennial or annual cover crops that are cultivated with the specific purpose of being planted with the cash crops. So we are planting our cash crops with our cover crops, which might sound really weird because most people terminate their cover crops or knock them down, but we don't. We plant simultaneously. And these can really aid with weed suppression, water retention, nitrogen fixation is a big one, and soil erosion because we do get those high winds in South Dakota. And some common cultivars or varieties that we see are clovers, cowpea, and then foxtail millet are really common ones that we see in the Midwest, and they can just be really good if you don't want to use landscape fabric. This is also really common with people that want to do a native landscape restoration. They want to help the native pollinators. Some people don't want grass anymore in their lawns, and so they are transitioning to clovers. White clover seems to be a really popular one, and they are mowable, so you can operate it with a push mower, and a lot of people seem to really be interested in this. And so then to add on from that, you're probably thinking, why am I showing you these random bugs on your screen? But with that, they can really be a great ground cover, and they can help with those soil biological communities. And so when I was an undergraduate at Indiana State University, I sampled many different sites, and a lot of them had cover crops and a lot of them had landscape fabric or plastic mulch. On the left, I actually researched a plot that had plastic mulch for 2 years because we had a parasitic mite, and here's the parasitic mite. And it survived. And then on the right, that was another, it's called Diplura. It's a type of springtail, and it also existed in those 2 years of plastic mulch. And so we were really able to see what was happening, how are we affecting those soil communities, because when we talk about cover crops and we talk about tillage, we, kind of assume that we're losing the nutrients, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, which are really big components, but we also tend to disrupt those soil communities. And so with cover crops and living mulches and even plastic mulch or landscape fabric, because we are shading that soil, we really do kind of start to think about those soil biological communities. So I will be incorporating this in my research this year. If this is something that really interests you, you can talk to me about it at Garden Discovery on Sunday. I will be there at the Horticulture Extension table, and I will also be giving a presentation on cover crops specifically, I believe at 3:15 p.m. So yeah, if you want to talk about burning landscape fabric or cover crops or whatever you want, I will be there to talk about that, or you can email me.
Awesome. And I'll have you leave that slide there just for a moment, Alexis, before you close it out. Also, I just want to call out in the chat for everyone, Kira, our lovely extension assistant tonight, has been dropping some links so you can see research reports from Alexis, as well as a short video of me and Alexis and Rhoda Burrows out in our field last year. And would certainly welcome folks back to our field day, which is going to be September 12th, 2023, where you'll have a chance to see Alexis's projects and those of many other students. And look forward to seeing, I invite everyone to look forward to seeing our graduate students present. We're going to be featuring a graduate student presenter each month of Garden Hour, and I'm lucky enough to have 4 students, so that works out really well. So Alexis, we did have a question. What was the name of the landscape fabric? And I don't know that we specifically use a brand name, but do you want to describe what it is? And I'm happy to weigh in on that one as well.
Yeah, I don't know the name. I believe we got it from Tessman's, which is like a bulk ordering company, to my understanding. It's basically just a woven kind of material. I don't know if you could weigh in, Dr. Lang, but yeah.
Happy to. And to clarify for folks, if you're a commercial farmer, you might be able to buy from a place like Tessman Company because they're a wholesale supplier. My best advice for home gardeners is go to a garden center or landscape supply store and ask for a 10+ year woven landscape fabric. It tends to be heavier duty. And I was recently reminded when we ordered more fabric for our project that some are UV protected and some are not. And that UV protection makes it tends, then the landscape companies or garden centers tend to call it a 20 to 30-year landscape fabric. So I have not been, well, I guess I've been gardening long enough to test the longevity of a 30-year landscape fabric, but not enough to actually be taking the data. So I can't promise that it's actually going to last the 20 to 30 years, but that UV protection does make a difference. I will caution folks, one time I got landscape fabric and it had kind of a fuzzy side. That was not super great to work with. It did not hold up as long, and the way I was using it, I was just cutting that and it wasn't coming unwoven. But if you tried to cauterize that fuzzy fabric, I think you'd have a mess. So this should, I mean, it's basically a plastic-based product that the strands are woven together, but I tend to go to a landscaper or a local garden center that has, you know, and ask for heavy duty woven landscape fabric, because we don't want you to just use plastic. It's not permeable. Your plants aren't going to get water, air, gases, CO2 is not going to be exchanged with the soil. So definitely avoid that. And Alexis, there was a question about, what about paper mulches? Some people have seen, you know, instead of plastic mulch or landscape fabric, there's some heavy duty paper mulches. Do you want to weigh in on that, or any thoughts, or we can discuss that one together too?
Yeah, so we talk a little bit about this in fruit production. I know like old newspapers, like shredding up old newspapers or paper is another big thing, because it can dissolve in the soil over time. And it's, I don't know, it's paper, so people seem to really like that for some reason. And it can choke out those early season weeds. I've seen it a lot in like strawberries and raspberry production, but I've never seen that too much in vegetable production. Yeah, that's really all I know about that.
My exposure to specifically, I have seen, there are commercial companies that are making like rolls of paper that you can lay with a plastic mulch layer, just like you would for vegetable production. We had 1 year of research of it at Iowa State, I think, as I was a new graduate student. It wasn't my project. I know some challenges with the rain and the wind in Iowa, and I would say this advice with the wind would translate well to South Dakota, is that fabric started to break apart sooner than we wanted it to in the season. So that was one challenge. Again, you know, maybe it's enough to suppress weeds early in the season and kind of give you a jump, which can be really helpful. But that's one caution with something that's meant to really degrade within a year, is that sometimes it will degrade too quickly, depending on, you know, if we get a really, really rainy summer, it might degrade faster too. So just something to consider with the paper landscape fabric. Again, a potential option. Some people will use cardboard. Just remember, if you're using really thick layers of newspaper and cardboard on top of your garden soil and you're not adding compost and soil on top of that, like the lasagna garden method, you have layers. But if you're essentially just suffocating your soil and then trying to plant into that, you might have some issues with gas exchange, which could be problematic for soil microbes. So Alexis, we have a few more questions. I also want to call out, someone pointed out this great advice that you can get landscape fabric from the NRCS. So don't be afraid to contact your local conservation district or NRCS office. Again, they might share the same building in some places, but remember, one's a federal employee, one's a state employee. But there'd be some great opportunities there, because the conservation districts, I know, use a lot of landscape fabric for their tree plantings. So that's a great tip. Thank you, Julie. All right, so a question from Ruth Beck, who, full disclosure, is a former SDSU extension specialist. So hello, Ruth, thanks for this question. Alexis, does the cover crop compete with your cash crop for moisture? Because moisture is often limiting to many gardeners in central and western South Dakota. And maybe you want to share your experiences in Beresford.
Yes. So it's going to be kind of hard to see, but this was in June, when the right picture with the squash, that was in June, and you can kind of see the our clover and those aisleways right there between the fabric, that it was already kind of starting to look patchy and a little weird. And if you know anything about South Dakota, or just South Dakota in general, we don't get a lot of rain. And so we really kind of started to see a lot of dying effects, and our in-row management, we saw a lot of competition with our clover. And then once it kind of started to die from not getting rain, our drought tolerant weeds took over, and it just really competed with our cash crop. Brookings, I didn't really have as many problems with it. I think we had better early season moisture to really allow the cover crops to grow, and it wasn't as big of a problem, but we did still see a lot of cash crop competition, and some of my yields like were impacted, like 61% like of my no-till clover plots like didn't produce compared to my bare ground. So it can be really like competition limiting.
Yes, so stay tuned for year 2 of that research. And again, those full research reports are in this in the chat box for everyone. And again, there are some benefits of using, living pathways, planting your broccoli straight into a clover living mulch. We're probably not going to recommend that after year 1. But that's why we're studying some of that in-row management of how can we maybe get the best of both worlds. And we're not quite there yet, so stay tuned. And Alexis, finally, just some love for clover as a bee lawn. Someone just planted that this week and was really excited about it. So I want to call out again, if you are in the area and get a chance to come to Garden Discovery Festival, we're also going to be giving away some clover cover crop seeds. So visit with Alexis, and our student, her classmate Jocelyn, will also be there on Sunday. So thank you so much. And if anyone else has questions for Alexis, please drop those in the Q&A, and don't be afraid to reach out via email too. We always love hearing from you. Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, hello again, everyone. I'm excited to just share some photos of children, because it wouldn't be a garden hour presentation with me if I didn't at least include photos of children, if I couldn't include the animals. So just some food for thought is, what has everyone planted? These are photos of my niece Amelia and my nephew Sam, and they have both been very busy planting. This photo of Amelia planting her flower bed, this is in eastern Iowa, the Quad Cities area, if that means anything to some of you. So they literally just planted their flower garden tonight, and they were very excited about it. I know they had some beautiful geraniums in there. And then Sam is helping plant in north central Iowa near Algona. It looks like he's doing some bean seeds and working out the proper depth, because again, bean seeds can be planted a little deeper than some of our other vegetable crops. So I hope planting is going well for everybody, and that hopefully you're getting some of the little people in your lives involved with planting as well. I just wanted to share, I believe the first week of Garden Hour, I mentioned that I am growing Bonanza tomato. This is because of some seeds that were saved and shared with me, for which I'm really grateful. But the Bonanza tomato is a slicing tomato that was developed at South Dakota State University back in like the late 70s, sometime in the 80s. And I'm very excited to grow this out in my own garden. So watch for updates on the Bonanza tomato. I just wanted to share that it is out in the garden. I am going to be watching those low temperatures on Friday. I'm a little nervous about those. It's not going to freeze, but it's going to get down to 40. So the tomatoes might not be perfectly happy. I will not be surprised if I see a little purpling of leaves if they're not able to take phosphorus up, because that can be somewhat limited in cold soils. And we tend to notice that on cold tomatoes and cold geraniums, interestingly enough. So maybe something to keep an eye on if we get some colder soils. But again, it's just going to be for one night, so I'm not super worried about it. And as you know, I'm an early planter. All right, so my main objective tonight was to just talk a little bit about the McCrory Gardens trial program, which is full credit to Dr. David Graper, my predecessor, who started these collaborations and really developed this trial program. And then Chris Shalanker from McCrory Gardens carried it on after Dr. Graper retired. And now myself and Chris and Amy, their curator, the three of us really work together to lead this program. And then we have some wonderful undergraduate assistants who help with photos and data collection. And honestly, the first time I got to know Sydney was when she was helping me collect data my first year. And I didn't really know how to be a trial evaluator. But the credentials for trial evaluators, you should know something about plants, and you should be really good at making observations. So chances are many of you listening on the call tonight are already trial evaluators because you're trying new things in your garden and you're noting what works well, what didn't. That plant flopped over. I've thought of different ways to say that plant flopped over. There's the term lodging. That's a really polite way, or the proper term to say that plant flopped over and it looked like garbage. I try not to write "it looked like garbage" in the comments. That doesn't go over well. So I write things a little more politely than that. But we have a trial evaluation program at McCrory Gardens, and there's kind of 4 parts to this evaluation. We have that I'm involved with. There's also tree and shrub evaluations that Chris and others at McCrory are involved with, but I should start with, I'm kind of involved with the herbaceous trials and also working with the roses. So let's break down what we're up to. The first trial program that is hosted at McCrory Gardens is for All American Selections, and this is a nationwide nonprofit. And their entire goal is to, trial vegetables, container plants, annual and perennial flowering plants, as well as grasses, in regions all across the United States. I would say they have a couple hundred evaluators. And I know I joked about the criteria for being an evaluator, but please know that these trials from All American Selections, they work with botanical gardens such as McCrory. They work with universities such as SDSU. We just happen to check both boxes, all across the country. And they will send us unnamed plant material that will compare to things that are already on the market. And sometimes people will see me out there and just assume I'm texting on my phone. But they make evaluations really easy these days. And I'm, looking at those plants, I'm commenting on, is the trial plant doing better or worse than the comparison? And I'm taking a lot of that data on my phone, and then I'm adding pictures, and all of that is going to All American Selections, their national database, and they're taking all of that data, crunching it. And at the end of the year, they announce their 2023 winners in this case. And then they also have a historical database of all the winners by region. So I shared 2 different ways that you could look at All American Selections that might interest you. The entire state of South Dakota is considered the Heartland region. So you're able to look up plants that have been proven to do especially well in the central part of the United States. And if you're interested in what were the winners last year, because I want to try something new in my garden, you can look at the 2023 winners and generate a list like what you can see on the right. The plants that are circled are 2 that I know I have personally seen over the last 2 years of trial evaluations. And gosh, that big duck orange was so pretty. I swear to you, okay, maybe this isn't scientific, but they were huge blooms and really sturdy. They would not be marigolds for a small garden spot. They were big, beefy, sturdy marigolds, but absolutely gorgeous. And then that double shot snapdragon that I have circled was one that I really, really enjoyed. So I was glad to see that it was a winner. And again, when I was judging it, I had no idea what its name was. I had no idea who the breeder was. I just knew that it was gorgeous and beautiful. And I was thrilled to see that it was indeed a winner this year. So if you need some new ideas, or if you're out in the garden centers and see something with that All American Selections logo and you're like, is this a marketing gimmick? Perhaps, but know that there's a couple hundred scientists and botanic garden employees and people who love plants and spend a lot of time looking at plants who have evaluated those plants to crunch the data to earn it that designation. So rest assured that this is a logo in the garden center that means something. For folks who love roses, just a really quick snapshot, and I would encourage you to look up the nursery magazine and read the entire spread on the roses. Also, there's just gorgeous pictures. But there is a group called the American Rose Trials for Sustainability, And it's a group of researchers and nonprofit employees from various parts of the United States who are really, really excited about roses. And I've had the pleasure of working with Kristine and kind of joining the larger arts group to also serve as a trial evaluator. And I learn new things about roses the more I look at roses. But these rose trials are planted in the Arboretum at McCrory, and we evaluate them for the first season they're planted, and then they overwinter, and we check them again the following year and evaluate them for that entire season. So one of the criteria is the roses have to survive the winter in order for them to be considered as a winner. And the master roses that are part of the, they look a year ahead. So these were roses that were evaluated last year. They released the data this year, but they call it their 2024 arts winners. So they're kind of forward facing in case you were confused about that. It is 2024. That was the year they designated. But the Oh So Easy Peasy, the Sun Rosa Red, and the Pink Brick House all came out as winners for our region. And unfortunately for folks West River, I will admit that when I say our region in this case, because of how climate zones are designated for rose performance, West River and East River are designated differently. So the DFB, the humid continental, would be our side of the state where these roses were trialed. And they didn't have any listed for semi-arid steppe climate winners for this season. And I know there's certain areas of the United States where they're trying to get more arts rose trials. So perhaps some of my West River friends on the call, if you know of any public gardens out west that might be interested in arts rose trial, feel free to connect them to me because I'd be happy to make that connection and recruit, because it would be really fun to know what's going to do well out there for you. I have a hunch you might have less problems with black rot or not black spot, for example. All right, and finally, I just want to share, because I don't think I'm going to have time to get through all of them because we've had awesome discussion tonight, but the McCrory Gardens 2022 trial report for annual and perennial plants is on the SDSU Extension website. We had over 40 herbaceous perennials and over 60 annuals in the trial. And that was annuals that were both in ground and over 30 containers, as you can see in this photo here. So this was a photo from last year. And all of those annuals and perennials were evaluated 2 times a month. And we rated them on plant performance. So foliage health, uniformity, growth, habit, color, all of, resistance to insect damage, all that stuff, as well as bloom performance. And that full report, it's 70+ pages. I've got a copy right here. I won't flip through the whole thing because we would be here all night. But if you're someone who loves looking at plant ratings and evaluator comments and plant details, please know that the PDF version of this report is online, and there are going to be print copies available at Garden Discovery Festival. And the minute you print a report, you see 20 more things that I wish I could have included. So we tried to pack a lot of information into this, and please know that there's already going to be more that we could pack into it for future years. And I think I might stop there. We're going to end on a cliffhanger, folks. But I'm going to let you know that for perennials and annuals, we designated top performing plants. And I wanted to let you know that we're going to have those reports on our website as well. And I realize now that I was seeing the links from the chat, so maybe I can quickly go through the photos. We're going to bring it back. This is what happens when they let me host Garden Hour and no one else is here. Things go crazy. All right. And again, if anyone has questions for me, feel free to drop those in the Q&A now that I'm looking at the right box. Thanks for hanging with me. All right. So top performers really quickly. And again, these are for perennial trials. So they had to have overwintered for at least 1 season. So we evaluate them the season that the perennial plants are planted, but I will not consider them for a top performer status until I know if they can actually survive a South Dakota winter, which seems fair. And hopefully you all appreciate that. Ornamental oregano, the drops of Jupiter. This was a top performer in 2021 as well as 2022. And then our love of it as evaluators was underscored by the fact that garden visitors also voted it as a People's Choice Award. The lime green foliage is normal. It took me a while to get used to that when I was evaluating this plant, but that is normal. It really stands out in the garden, and I'm someone who loves purple and green contrast anyway, so maybe that's my bias as an evaluator. So I'm glad that the people voted and love it as well. But if you're looking for something to brighten up your garden and you like, you know, kind of those unique lime green colors, this would be a great option. And it looked, you know, it looked like a carpet. And it will be coming out of the gardens in McCrory. So I was going to say, this is one that will be coming out to make room for the 2022 perennials. So if you want to see this one, come to Garden Discovery Festival and see a small version of it coming out of dormancy before it's relocated to another place in the garden. The Phlox Luminary Ultraviolet, same situation as the oregano, won in both years, and the people loved it. And this photo is not doing it justice. It truly is an ultraviolet purple. No issues with powdery mildew that I saw in either year. It stands up nice and straight. It holds on to those blooms. So a really, really nice phlox. And if you're someone who's like been really turned off by Russian sage, there are a couple of great options for some of the new Russian sage that's coming out. This denim and lace is really cool. It's got kind of finer, lacier leaves. So even before it bloomed, I thought it was really attractive and just kind of petite and cute in the garden. It's a little bit more compact and smaller than a lot of the Russian sage that we're used to, especially if you have a really old Russian sage planting. So if you have a smaller garden, I would consider this one. The other one that was a top performer was Sage Advice, and this one was taller and had more of a spread, and it's going to be interesting to see how much this one's going to be coming out of the garden as well. So this gives you a good idea of how much it spread in two years after 2 overwinterings. But both myself and Amy, my co-evaluator, we both rated the bloom performance as excellent multiple times in August and September. It just really held on to those blue to lavender flowers and was just absolutely gorgeous. And if you're someone who, you know, has drier conditions, is looking for a drought tolerant plant and something that's going to do well in the fall, we have 2 different sedums that were top performers, and this back and black, just that deep purple, and then those maroon flowers. And if you look close, the petals are actually kind of a light cream to pink color, but you really just see the bright maroon centers on those flowers, and your eyes are just kind of drawn to them. And this was also a winner of a People's Choice Award, and folks really loved it. And last but not least, another great sedum. And this one was really sturdy. It was really dense and thick in the middle. It wasn't flopping over like some of the older stone crops tend to do. So that was something else that really impressed me about this should have been labeled as Coral Jade. Sorry about that, folks. This is Rock and Grow Coral Jade, not Back in Black. And again, there's going to be a full report on top performers out in a couple of weeks, or watch for it in our next garden newsletter. And again, if you want to see the perennials up close and personal early this spring, would love to see you at Garden Discovery Festival. I'm going to be giving a tour, and just to help you plan ahead a little bit, because I may not see you between now and then, but we are going to have a high tunnel field day up in Webster, South Dakota, just on the edge of town at Waldner Farms. Myself and Rhoda Burrows are going to be speaking, along with Darren Waldner, and his mom, Sue, and wife, Melissa, are going to be there. And it's a great chance to walk through a high tunnel, understand some of Darren's decisions about how and why he built it, and understand growing conditions within those high tunnels. And that event is free, open to the public. If you have high tunnels already, or you're thinking about high tunnels, or you're just curious about high tunnels, we would love to see you at that event. So please, please join us. And as we wrap up tonight, right on the nose, or as close to it as possible, I just want to encourage folks one more time. You're always welcome to call the SDSU Extension Garden hotline or email them. We have staff that are answering the lines for Aberdeen, Sioux Falls, and Rapid City. And coming up in June, we are going to have a staffer in Pierre, South Dakota. So we're very excited to have representation from across South Dakota. And with that, Garden Hour always goes faster than I think it's going to. Sydney and Alexis, I really, really appreciate both of you joining us tonight. I might put you on the spot in a sentence or less. What are you really excited about for Garden Discovery Festival? And I'll go first. I'm excited that the weather's going to be gorgeous and it's going to be a great day to walk around in the gardens. Sydney, how about you?
I'm excited for the plant sales. They're always a hit and people love them.
And we all go home with full vehicles because we purchase more plants, even though we have 35 plus and counting in our office. And what about you, Alexis? What are you excited for?
The plant sales, and I'm just excited for the questions. We always get really interesting questions at the horticulture booth, so I always get really excited for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alexis and Sydney. It was great to hang out with you on Garden Hour. Kira, thanks for working in the background to keep things running smoothly. And many thanks to all of you for joining us tonight for Garden Hour. We look forward to seeing you next week. It might be a few weeks before I see you, but rest assured you're going to be in great hands with the horticulture team and learn some awesome things to round out the month of May. So I'll see you again in June. But everyone else, same time, same place next week, and join us again for Garden Hour. Have a great evening.